Words of introduction. Different svarim in the Masorah, the tradition, different books get a different amount of attention. Of course, the Chumash gets the lion's share of the attention. More commentaries are written on it than anything else. The Haggadah for Pesach, there are hundreds of commentaries that are written. Because Esther is up there. A lot of commentaries. Partly because the story is so open, the surface of the story, and it's so riveting, it's so dramatic, and it captures people's imaginations. So it can also capture the interest of a lot of commentaries. I'm giving these shiurim not because I have studied all the commentaries, or half of the commentaries, or 10% of the commentaries. I have certain subjects that are of interest to me, and those are the ones that I've invested in. I want it to be clear that I'm not in any way implying that what I say about the Megillah is the truth, the only truth, the whole truth, not even the most important truth. It's that piece of the truth that I have worked on and I can share with you, but nothing more than that. My particular interests are in philosophy, as you know, also in Kabbalah, also in linguistic analysis. The words, what do they mean? What are their implications? Logical analysis, because my area in philosophy was an area of logic, and maybe to a certain extent psychology, the psychology of the figures who are described and the events that take place. Those are my primary interests. So that's what I'm going to talk about. But when it comes to the Megillas Esther, I'm leaning a lot on the Malbim. Which is translated into English and be very worthwhile. You're looking at before the holiday comes. Now, everybody remarks that the name of God does not appear in the whole book of Esther. That's important. But you should also take into account that it's not the only book of the Bible for which that's true. There's another one, Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs. God's name does not appear in that book either. Maybe at some point we'll compare the two of them and see what they have in common that explain why those two alone have no mention of God's name, any of God's names. And I should say, there's no mention explicitly. Implicitly, if you use gematrios and the first letter of each word, and so on, you can find God's names everywhere. But that's not the point. The point is that in the actual text of the book, the name isn't there. One other, when speaking of the king Achashverosh, the text has two possibilities. Sometimes it says Hamelech Achashverosh, the king Achashverosh, and sometimes it just says HaMelech, the king, because there's only one king that the story is talking about. Our tradition tells us that when it says HaMelech alone, it has a double reference to the flesh and blood person sitting on the throne and to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Wow. When it says HaMelech HaChashverosh, that's not true. Then it's only referring to the flesh and blood person on the throne. But that means when you go through and you see the psukim, if it says just HaMelech, you have to stop and think. The double reference, the double address. Okay, the beginning. Well, let's read through some of the beginning, and then I will comment on some of the features, both of what's in the text and what's missing from the text. Came to pass in the days of Achashverosh. As you know, one of the key players in this story is Mordechai. Mm-hmm. It could have started by saying in the days of Mordechai. So Achashverosh is somehow very central here. I'll say just a little bit more. In Gemara Baba Basra, it records who wrote which sefer. The authors of each of the Sfarim in the Tanakh. Right. And it starts by saying, Moshe Kosav Sifro v'Parshas Bilam. Bilam, Balak, right? Mm-hmm. Why single that out for special mention? Parshas Balak is part of the Torah, so it's just another part of the Torah.
So no kofrim can say that.
I'm sorry, say again?
So a kofir can come and say, oh, he was a Navi too, maybe he wrote it.
Good try. Rashi on the spot explains that the Sefer is really like a biography. And Parshas Balak doesn't mention Moshe Rabbeinu at all. It happened in the hills. No one knew about it. Even Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know about it until Kosh Baruch Hu said, write it down in the Torah. So why would this be included in a biography of Moshe? Sefer Yeshaya is a story of Yeshaya's life. Of course, Yeshaya's life had wars and kings and negotiations and ups and downs and all sorts of things, but it's a story of his life. Yirmiyahu is a story of his life. Each one is a story of someone's life. So here, because this is much shorter, it's only a few short years in which the entire... But who's the main figure? Who is it about? And you know the very end of the book says, and the deeds of Ahasuerus were written in the public history sources, and it ends with taxes that he levied on the kingdom. Sounds like it's a story of a portion of Ahasuerus' life. Now, once you take into account the fact that God's name doesn't appear, so you sort of form the thought in your mind, well, maybe the point of the book is to hide some of the main features. Of course, not to hide them so well you can't find it out, but to hide it so it isn't obvious. So if the book starts with Achashverosh and ends with Achashverosh, that creates the false impression that it is a Achashverosh history. Doesn't have to be the deeper truth. So I'm just pointing that out as orientation. Okay, getting to pass, there's Achashverosh. Now, who is this? So the reader apparently is not expected to know. Achashverosh, who reigned from Hod to Cush over 127 provinces. I mean, the book was written during Achashverosh's lifetime. Is it conceivable that the person who's reading this doesn't know who he is? Apparently, then, this description is important for the story. It contributes something to the story. If you left it out, there'd be something about the story you would miss. That in those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne, really, where else would you expect him to sit? Which was in the Shushan, the capital, in the 3rd year of his reign. Is that important? Why is the 3rd year of his reign important? Who cares what year it was? He made a feast for all his officials and his servants. The army, now I think, well, maybe it's not bad. It's not Sava. It's army, it's Chel Paras. Chel is like, could be, okay. Army of Persia and Media, the nobles and officials of the provinces being present. Representatives of the whole empire. When he displayed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty for many days. In other words, it doesn't say the setting was a rich setting. No, it's his riches. And not only is it his riches, but he's displaying his riches. There's got to be something there. That has to be part of the point. Somehow, it's important for him to show everybody that he's rich. Right. That has to be put into the scenario. I'm going to give you a whole scenario behind this, I think, which I took from the Malva, which explains all of this. Now, here we go. A party. 180 days, a 6-month bash. You know, he could teach Los Angeles something. You know, they never dreamt of a 6-month bash. 6 months! You know, even in the pubs of London, they don't dream something like this.
I think they dream.
So, what's going on? Why is he doing this? What's the point of it? And when these days were fulfilled, the king made a week-long feast for the people who were present in Shushan, the capital, great and small alike, not officials, not princes and people of authority. No, this is everybody. Everybody in the capital, in the courtyard of the garden of the king's palace. Now a description of all the beautiful things. There were hangings of white, fine cotton, blue wool, held with cords of fine linen and purple wool, upon silver rods and marble pillars, couches of gold and silver, on a pavement of green and white, shell and onyx marble. The drinks were served in golden goblets, no two goblets alike, which is the pshat, but the remez we'll see is a little different. The royal wine in abundance, according to the bounty of the king. Again, displaying his riches and now displaying his bounty, how generous he is. Why is it important for him to be displaying his wealth? And why is it important for him to be generous? Why is that important? And watch how it gets emphasized. And the drinking was in accordance to the law, without coercion. Das is a little softer than law, custom. No one was forced to drink anything particular. So the king had ordered the officers of his house, they should do according to every man's pleasure. Now let's see. You're having a dinner party. You're celebrating something. You invite a lot of guests. Typically, you choose the menu. It's your party.
Right.
They like it. They like it. They don't like it. Let them go out to McDonald's and get a hamburger. You have a list of courses. You're opening a restaurant. And you say, oh, would you like roast pheasant? Would you like turkey? Would you like duck? We have whatever you like. To do according to the will of each person. Satisfy him. Do whatever he wants. Why is that? So here's some background. Achashverosh was not in the royal line. He didn't have royal blood flowing in his veins. He was someone who took over the kingdom. Some say he was the head of the army, and there were battles, and he did very well. And he had a certain amount of popular backing, and when the king died, he took over. But he's not a descendant of Nebuchadnezzar. So there's a question of legitimacy, a question of real authority, a question of loyalty. And he's afraid of that. He's worried about that. And as you'll see, this comes up at least a dozen times in the Megillah. That what he does on the basis of being afraid for his popularity and his authority. Now, one of the things, I'll finish the description, I'll tell you a question. One of the things that you want in a king is that he should be rich. Why do you want the king to be rich? Because then he's not in the pocket of somebody who's supplying him with money. In England, many times, there were nobles, and the king was the one who wore the crown, but if he wanted to fight a war, he get the money from the nobles. No, then they decided what wars he'll fight, what wars he won't fight, or what taxes he'll collect, what taxes he won't collect, because without them, he has no kingdom. Achashverosh says, nobody pushes me around. I'm not beholden to anybody. I can handle everything on my own. That's one thing. Number two, he wants people's favor. He wants them to approve of him. So he throws this gigantic party, this bash, and everybody's going to enjoy. And he tells them in Shushan, where he's controlling the waiters and the food, do whatever people want. I want them to realize that I have them in mind, that I have the good interests in mind. I want to be popular as a king. I'm not asserting my authority. I'm worried about my authority. Now, it says, goblets of gold, no two goblets alike. When the reader chants the Megillah, and he comes to those words, v'kelim shonim, which literally means vessels from various vessels, which says nothing at all, because it's various, what does that tell you? It doesn't tell you anything. You'll notice that he changes the tune. From the tune of the Megillah, he goes into the tune of Eicha. At least some places they do. Eicha, lamentations. Why? Because there's a whole historical background for this party. And this is why it's important in the third year of his reign. Yirmiyahu, prophet Jeremiah, said that after 70 years in exile, they're coming back. God is going to bring the Jewish people back, rebuild the temple. But Yirmiyahu didn't say when the 70 years start. Just said after 70 years. And there were a few candidate dates for when it might start. Well, let's see. Babylonia conquered us, took us off into exile. Once before in history we were in exile. That place was called Egypt. Right. And when we left Egypt, it was pretty spectacular, especially for the Egyptians, right? They suffered a lot. Their power was broken. So the question arose, what's going to happen when the Jews are saved from this exile? Is the power of the ruling party going to be broken like it was in Egypt? What is in store for us? They remembered the Exodus, and they knew about it. It wasn't trivial to them. They didn't dismiss it. They were concerned about it. There was a previous king named Belshazzar. Belshazzar had a calculation. When is the 70 years up? He started from a particular starting date, and he calculated 70 years, and when it was up, he said, aha. Whatever Jeremiah meant, it's not working. Maybe the Jews don't deserve it. The 70 years is up. God hasn't taken them back. We're safe. We're safe. And he threw a party to celebrate. And he took the vessels of the temple, which the Babylonians had looted. He took them out and used them at the party. That night he was assassinated. Wow. So much for him. So those around him said, maybe we made a miscalculation. This didn't work out so well. So they put the vessels back in the treasury of the thing, and somebody else took over as king. Okay, now Achashverosh has his calculation, and in the 3rd year of his reign, according to his calculation, the 70 years is up. So he feels he's out of danger. So he's celebrating, and he's using the vessels from the temple. Vessels of various vessels. That's the hint in the Megillah that he was using the temple vessels. And as you know from the story, there wasn't a disaster. So he's celebrating what looks like, to him, the failure of Jewish prophecy. And he gets away with it. Now, you may have heard, why were the Jews of that generation vulnerable? And there are various explanations. But one of the explanations is that they too participated in this party, this celebration. We'll talk about Rav Dessa's essay on this subject when we get to the end. We go back and do some more of the philosophy. But they also participated. And they were vulnerable, not just because they were having a good time. And the food was kosher. It says to do according to each person's will. Pork chops, Reb Yid? Sorry, I don't do that. I'll have rice with tea leaves or something. No, everything was done according to the desire of the person. It wasn't that. So where was the crime? Such a terrible crime of participating in this party that the whole Jewish people becomes vulnerable to annihilation because the party was celebrating the failure of Jewish philosophy. I want you to know, I won't say Lahaftal because it's the same thing. The Nazis created a museum of Judaism, to commemorate what they destroyed. They had Sefer Torah there, and they had all sorts of Jewish implements there, set up as a museum to commemorate what they destroyed. Right? So, you imagine a legion of Jews going to visit the museum? Yeah. Jews in hiding, Jews in secret. How could you walk in there? So this is what made one of the reasons why they were so vulnerable, because they participated in this celebration. Okay, that's some of the political background, which will be very important to us as we go through the Sefer. Now, Rav Moshe Shapiro, Rav Matzah Solomon, brought on the Chai L'chaim. He should be made a very interesting observation here. There's one element that you would have expected to be included in the description of the beauty and luxury of the feast, which is left out entirely, and that's music. Does it mention music? So he has a whole essay on the nature of music and the way in which it integrates with the Jewish tradition, and whether, in particular, non-Jewish music is permissible or forbidden, under what conditions. And he makes an observation, which he bases on statements in Rishonim. The way it's put in the popular language is, Eid nigul mekabel tuma. Music doesn't become defiled. And he puts it this way. What kind of music would you have them play? His purpose, one of his purposes, was to undermine the Jews. That's one of his purposes. And that's why he wanted them to feel comfortable. Now, let me go on about this a little bit, because this is an important matter for our contemporary lives. I don't know if you know my son, Nehemiah Gottlieb, who lives in Lakewood. There's an international organization called TAG, Technology Awareness Group, helping people cope with technology and giving them the tools to cope with technology. And it's his group. He founded it. It has 50 offices worldwide. That's not all he's doing. He's doing other things as well. He lives in Lakewood. He's a person that's known there. So he points out, what you want to do, if you want to undermine Jews, make them feel very comfortable and safe in a basically non-Jewish context. No danger of that in America today. Jews don't feel safe anywhere, except when they're along their own. But if you have this party and you're celebrating and you're inviting everybody, so the Jews aren't singled out, and to a Jew you say, just badatz, everything with a badatz hechsher, nothing going on Shabbos, have your Shabbos at home. Don't worry. We understand you, and we're doing everything to make you feel comfortable. Comfortable with the Persians and the Medes and all the other ones. Just everybody's, we're all friends. We're all considerate of one another. We believe in multiculturalism, really multicultural. That's a terrific way to take a Jew off his guard and not to realize the influence to which he's being subject. So the question is, what role could music play in that? How could you use music to make him feel comfortable and yet undermine him? So Rav Matasiel says, music arouses emotions and ideas that are in the mind of the person listening. Same style of music will arouse different ideas in different people's minds, because people's minds have different ideas in them. So, for example, let's say you play war music, fighting music. So a Persian is going to think of being on the battlefield and stabbing people with his sword and taking booty and a Jew's going to think, I'm struggling with my Yetzer Hara, my evil inclination, and I'm doing my best to overcome him. And the music, which would be crude, low, mundane to a Persian, will awaken in a Jew holy thoughts. Love. You have love song. The Persian will be thinking whatever he's thinking, and the Jews thinking about loving God, loving other Jews. That's why music isn't mentioned, because you can't use music in that way to undermine a person. The music will be grafted into his culture. It's not going to suck him into the culture of the person who wrote music. I will guess that for the vast majority of people who enjoy Beethoven, I'm not got a clue what kind of private life he led. It's just, just like they don't know Gandhi's private life. They think of him as a savior for a whole subcontinent and a preacher of nonviolence. Read about his family life, and you'll get a different picture of who he was. But you have the main feature of the person, and you don't go into that kind of background. So now he said, but there are exceptions. One he said explicitly, the other I know he meant as well. If you are about tshuva, and there are certain songs which have been taken, whole songs, taken from a non-Jewish source and had Jewish words put to them, like the Journeys tapes. And now they express Jewish ideas, but if you know the old song in the non-Jewish context, and when you hear, Simon and Garfunkel, you hear their songs, and you think of the old words, then for you it's not good, because it's pulling up in your experience that old culture. Also, music that destroys your das, your ability to think, like music that's blasting with strobe lights and so forth and so on. Shall I talk about weddings? No, I'm talking about weddings. Make your own inferences. That's not, he says, that's not Jewish music. Music that deprives you of your ability to think, to understand, that's not Jewish music. But other than that, there was one Rosh Yeshiva here in Jerusalem 20 years ago, who regularly listened to Mozart. He felt that Mozart gave him a certain calm and a certain focus, and people knew it. We didn't hide it. So that's why music isn't mentioned here, because of the fact that you can't undermine a person with music, because it will just reinforce and call up associations with his own culture. Okay, you had a question.
Yeah, no, I have three. So the first one was Achashverosh. How did he get the kingship in the first place? Like, if he took it, he just took it.
I don't know the exact details, but you do have this kind of thing happening all the time, especially the leader of the army. I mean, that's the power base. Mm-hmm. In fact, all dictators are dictators because they subvert the army. They bring the army in. They pay them well, and they give them special opportunities. I don't know if you've ever heard of Senator McCarthy in the 50s in the United States, who called everyone a communist and went after powerful political people. You know what stopped him? He challenged the army. They said, no, we're not playing ball. And then he lost his influence. The army is a very powerful, and when there's a power vacuum, when the emperor dies and the people who are standing in line aren't really competent, or they don't have popular appeal. I remember when Eisenhower was elected, because he settled the thing in Korea. He won 2 terms. He could have been, president till the end of his life. People were in love with him because he fought in the Second World War, did great work against the Nazis, and then he fought, and people were just thrilled with him. So it's quite natural for a general to step in. But all the way through, as I said, he's concerned about his popularity. Yeah, you had another question?
Yeah, and then how, the fact that the Rebbe said that he had, this kind of, it was almost like he doubted himself, right? Like he said, because he was scared of all this.
Absolutely.
So I was wondering, was it through this feeling of any day, something might happen, because he knew the prophecy and everything? Was it that doubt that kept him, that made him to act like this, with this party and
Well, I think this is the end of it. You're asking how long was the effect of worrying about the possibility that God will take them back and destroy the kingdom, so on and so on. The Megillah opens with this celebration of the fact that the prophecy is wrong, Kiviyachol, and then it doesn't play any role, as far as I could tell, throughout the rest of the book, because he feels he's finished with that. And as you'll see right now, he has a challenge at this party, and he comes out with a gigantic prophet, a gigantic victory. So for him, this ends in the most spectacular positive sense. But he's always concerned about his popularity, as you'll see. So let's take a look at the next section, which is Vashti the queen also made a feast for the women in the royal house of King Ahasuerus. Who is Vashti the queen? Vashti the queen is the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. She has the royal blood. He doesn't, but she does. And she knows it. She knows it. Okay, she's queen and there's a king, and he was, let's say, he was head of the army, whatever it is, and they're married, so to speak, but she knows it. Notice what it says here. She made feast for the women in the royal house of King Ahasuerus. Doesn't say that he allowed her or he invited her and so on. No, she just made it. But I don't ask. I don't have to ask. I'm the one with royalty. He's a pretender. He's in. He's useful. So on. but I have it. And this is his problem. His problem is the ambiguity of his authority. Who's really running the show? She's not afraid. No, it's not a woman. If it had been another man, it would be just as bad. If it had been a grandson of Achashverosh, it would have been just as bad. Not like the woman, but his competition to me, because she really stands in the royal line. People do care about that, and I don't have it. And she's independent. She does what she likes. She probably had her own palace. She made it in his palace. The text goes out of its way to tell you she made it in his palace. You'll see when Esther's chosen queen, it's entirely different, an entirely different picture. On the seventh day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, yeah, he ordered okay, 7. Now I don't know. You have any idea what a chamberlain is?
Yeah.
What is it?
Like his one with servants, no?
Okay. So chamber, in French, the word chamber means room. It's room service, making up the beds and taking out the trash and stuff of the sort. But that's not the way it's used typically. Chamberlain is someone who's a servant, and he could be a prime minister. He's someone who serves whoever's in charge. So don't think of it as taking out the trash. These are the 7 top servants, advisors who attended the king Achashverosh. And he told them, bring Vashti the queen before the king wearing the royal crown. Really? Go bring her. Don't ask her if she wants to come. Don't invite her. Bring her. Wearing the crown instead of what? Not wearing the crown? Would she come without the crown? Well, what do you mean wearing the crown? You'll see in a moment.
Just the crown.
Now, why does he want her to come? To show off to the people and the officials her beauty. For she was beautiful to look upon. Now, you tell me, guys. Even with this is real anachronism, with our modern sensibilities, you try that on a woman, right? What are we actually going to get?
Gonna smack.
She's going to spit in his face. I'm not a model. I'm a queen. I have royal blood in my veins. I'm the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar who conquered the world. You want to show off my beauty? But that's what he wants. Because if he can bring her and show off her beauty, he makes her nothing. Wow. He makes her nothing. She's just a good-looking girl of whom there are 10,000 in the market. He wants to degrade her. He wants to disambiguate. He wants to make it clear that he's the one in authority. He sends the 7 not as a sign of honor, because they have to bring her, not to ask her permission. He sends them as a sign, show of authority. Now, the commentators push this, and they say, wearing the crown? He means wearing the crown only. Just the crown. To show off her beauty to all the assembled officials. Otherwise, depending on how she's dressed, she's going to show off her face, right? But then why say wearing the crown? Wearing the crown is taken for granted. She wouldn't come without wearing the crown. So that makes it really bitter. But it emphasizes this idea that his exercise is an exercise of degradation. And that's why his heart is merry with wine. This is what he really wants. He's suffering with this. Who's really running and why am I loyal to people who ask themselves, to the queen, to the king? I want to have my own unconditional authority. Was this smart? Well, when you're drunk, not everything you do is smart. Okay, so what happens? 12. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment conveyed by the chamber, servants. He wants me to come? Please tell him in my name to drop dead. You don't push me around. You don't tell me what to do. Who do you think you are? I thought I was king. Silly me. I thought I was running the show. Well, the king therefore became very incensed, and his anger burned at him, not because she said no, but it's public. It's public. She threw down the gauntlet. You think you're running my life? You think you're running the kingdom? Think again. I don't take orders from you. So now, instead of winning the war, he's losing the war. If this goes unanswered, then he's going to be an object of ridicule, and it will reinforce people who will say, it doesn't matter what the king says. So he's in deep trouble now. So now, the king conferred with the experts who knew the times, for such was the king's procedure, to turn to all who knew law and judgment. So what? Why do I care about that? Why is that put in here? The answer is it reinforces what I told you. He never made decisions on his own. He didn't just simply say, oh, let's tax them. Let's have a holiday next week, Let's everybody wear black hats on Sunday. No. Every decision went through channels. Now, not having been a king, not having grown up in the house of a king, the ways of royalty were largely unknown to him. So if he wants to do something, he goes to the advisors who know the customs, who know the local circumstances, 127 provinces, and who can tell him what is the kingly thing to do under these conditions. So here's an explicit statement of the condition that I mentioned to you. Let me just check the Hebrew here. Yeah, law and judgment. Das means really custom. What is the customary thing to do? And din is like law. It's like not judgment in the sense of figuring things out, but what the law requires. And those closest were these 7 people who had access to the king and who sat first in the kingdom. They were the top authorities. And he's consulting with them as to what should be done legally. And kadas is more like the thing that will be appropriate according to custom. To Queen Vashti, for not obeying the bidding of the king, she didn't obey, she didn't do the proposition that the king conveyed to her. In the hands of the Sarisim, the ones of the servants whom he sent to as a show of authority, is the king conveys an order with a show of authority, and the queen says, no. What should be done? So you'll now see an exercise in spin, a very beautiful exercise in spin. Memuchan declared before the king and the officials. It is not only the king whom Vashti the queen has wronged. Don't treat it as a private offense. Don't treat it as a private challenge. Spin it as a social and political statement. But also all the officials and all the people in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, they're all involved. They're all victimized by this. Watch what happens to these words. All the officials and all the people. All the people. As you'll see instantly, the words don't mean what they mean in your minds in plain English. And you get an idea of the position of the people for whom this book is written. For this deed of the queen will come to the attention of all women, making their husbands contemptible in their eyes. Women are going to say, my husband's nothing. My husband's nothing. By saying, King Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought before him, but she did not come. And just as she didn't come, I don't have to listen to you, George. Women don't have to listen to men. So now, when it said in the previous verse, that it's going to affect all the people, what did it really mean?
Women.
It's going to affect all the men, right? Women aren't people. They're like part of it. They're just adjuncts, right? All the people, meaning all the men, are going to suffer because of this. Don't paint it as she wronged you, she wronged the king, and then frame it that way to try and justify a punishment. No, bring everybody in. Make them understand that you're concerned with their honor, their respect, not yourself, but them. Can you hear King Ahasuerus hearing this? Yeah, that's right. People will be on my side. People will understand I'm doing it for them, not for myself. People will like it, they'll support it. That's the genius that Memuchan has here, to understand where the king is, where he's vulnerable, and to give him advice so as to be able to appeal to his vulnerabilities. Isn't this great? I mean, there's a lot going on here. And this day, goes on Memuchan with his declaration, the princesses of Persia and Media, who have heard of the queen's deed, will cite it to all the king's officials, and there will be much contempt and wrath. The women will show contempt for their husbands, and the husbands will be angry because of the way they're being treated. So, if it pleases the king, let there go forth a royal edict from him, a royal order, and let it be written in the laws of Persians the Medes, that it not be revoked, it can't be taken back. We'll see that will play a very important role in the like a king, the certain type of order of the king cannot be taken back. What should it say? That Vashti never again appear before King Ahasuerus, number one, she the person, and that the king confer her royal estate upon another who is better than she. In other words, depose her as king.
As queen.
I'm sorry, as queen, thank you. And take away her royal possessions because of what she has done. Mm-hmm. So, Memuchan, brilliant, he knows this is a problem for the king, and he says, you can use this as your leverage to get rid of her, your competition, that she shouldn't compete with you. You can destroy her completely. And the way in which you can do it without worrying about the loyalty of the kingdom is to say, the kingdom, of course, is only the men, it's not the women, and they'll all be on your side because you're protecting them from being treated contemptibly by their wives. It is a brilliant thought. Then, when the king's decree, which he shall proclaim, shall be resounded throughout all his kingdom, be announced and publicized, great though it be, meaning large though it be, all the wives will show respect to their husbands, great and small alike. And the husbands, knowing this, will all be on board. This proposal pleased the king, as you can imagine, and the officials. And the king did according to the word of Memuchan. And he sent letters into all the provinces, to each province its own script, to each people in its own language. She's got 127 provinces. So he has a vast bureaucracy. He can issue the order in his own language, and these people know how to translate into another, so that there's a royal document for each group. Otherwise, if they're left to translate and interpret from the king's language into their own language, there's room for all sorts of mistakes. No, that's already done at the royal level, and all the things go out, right? To the effect that every man should be ruling his own home. Look at that. There's the point of it. The effect is not Vashti is Vashti shmashti. That's not the issue. Every man should rule in his own home, and that's why they're on board. And then it says, and speak the language of his own people. Now, on the surface, that's very strange. What language was he speaking? He wasn't speaking the language of his own people? Why shouldn't he have been speaking the language of his own people? So one of the commentators says something very bitter here. You have 127 provinces under one central authority. There's going to be a lot of interaction between them, be business deals and entertainment and tourism and who knows what. There'll be intermarriages. Now let's imagine you have a man from one province, a woman from another province, and they marry and they have children. What language will the mother speak to the children? If nobody disturbs it, she'll speak her own language. It's very important that a woman should be able to relate to her children by speaking to them and express herself, express her emotions with language that's meaningful to her, not stuttering and figuring out what word to say and so forth and so on. No, not in Achashverosh's kingdom. In each man's house, the language that is spoken is the husband's language. And if the wife doesn't know it, let her learn it. Let her learn it. So that the father won't be cut off from the children. If the mother's at home and the mother's teaching the children, she's teaching her language, when the father comes home, they can't talk to him. It's hard for them to understand him. No! Let her break her teeth and stultify her heart to teach them in the language the father understands, so that the father can relate to the children. Ad kedei kach, to that extent of putting the father in the limelight. He's in charge. He's making everything happen, and everything's happening to please him. That was the council of the Mukhan, and the king and the advisors are overjoyed. So, when he walks out of this feast, Achashverosh is riding on top of the world. He hopes that he's got the support of the people generally, because he treated them very nicely and generously. And the people in Shushan, by the way, in Shushan it was old and young alike. That's because Shushan is the capital city. In the capital city, there's information. This servant hears it, and then they sell the information. There are leaks from the royal deliberations and so forth and so on. It's especially important to have the people in the capital on your side if you're the king. You want them to be thinking, will this hurt Achashverosh or won't this hurt Achashverosh? So he made this phenomenal feast for everybody in the capital city. This is politically motivated. The thing's really politically motivated. If you're a king, you have two choices: be politically motivated or be dead. And we'll see. Okay, this is the beginning. This is the introduction to the story, the background. Okay, pick it up.